Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us, and welcome to AIPAD Talks Depth of Field, a series of conversations between AIPAD member galleries and their artists. I'm Irene Papaifthimiou. I'm the Associate Director of the Photography Show, which is presented by AIPAD. Before we get started, we want to wait a couple of minutes for everyone to filter into the room. And in the meantime, I'd like to encourage everybody to check out our previous AIPAD Talks programming on our YouTube channel, which includes programming from the Photography Show last April. And of course, we hope that you'll join us for this year's edition of the fair, taking place once again in New York from April 22nd through the 26th at the Park Avenue Armory. And tickets are now live on apad.com. Today's talk features artist Jason Lee in conversation with Shannon Smith of Etherton Gallery in Tucson, Arizona. If you have any questions for Jason and Shannon, please send them to the Q&A during the talk, and your questions will be answered towards the end. I'm excited to introduce Shannon Smith and Jason Lee, and thank you both so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Irene, and thank you, AIPAD, for having Jason and I on today to talk about his exhibition, Alternative Views, with photographer Frank Gohlke at Etherton Gallery in Tucson, Arizona, and to talk photography, which I know Jason loves to do. I can't wait. Thank you to everyone who's joining us for this talk. I hope you'll join us at the end with questions and comments. And thank you, Jason, for being here today. I'm so excited to talk photography.
Yeah, good to see you again.
But before that, I'm going to introduce you. So Jason Lee, a native of Southern California. He's a photographer, director, and actor, having established a successful career as a professional skateboarder during skateboarding's pivotal late 80s and early 90s period. Lee would go on to pursue a career in acting, which would lead to working in film, television, and voiceover with such directors as Kevin Smith and Cameron Crowe. In 2001, Lee developed a passion for photography and dedicated himself to pursuing the medium as a creative profession. His photographic works have since been featured in multiple group and solo exhibitions, magazines, and books, with A Plain View, 2018, representing Lee's first official photo book and the debut publication of Film Photographic, the independent imprint Lee founded in 2015. Prior to the release of A Plain View in 2016, Texas-based Refueled magazine released a special limited edition hardcover issue featuring an extensive selection of Lee's American instant film photographs spanning 2006 to 2016. June 2019 saw the opening of OK, Jason Lee Photographs, Lee's debut museum exhibition, commissioned by Tulsa's Philbrook Museum of Art, and on view through December 2019. The exhibition featured 178 Oklahoma photographs, along with a selection of Larry Clark's Tulsa prints. In December 2020, UK publisher Stanley Barker released In the Gold Dust Rush, featuring a selection of Lee's previously unpublished American black and white photographs spanning 2008 to 2020. In November of 2020, at the request of the Galveston Historical Foundation, Lee traveled to Galveston, Texas to make photographs on the island for a special book release to help commemorate the foundation's 2021 150th anniversary. The result is Galveston 2021, a 176-page offering that features 98 color and black and white images accompanied by an essay by Will Gillum, head of publications, Amon Carter Museum of American Art. Lee has since published 3 additional books with several more titles in the works. I have so much I want to talk to you about today.
Okay.
I wanted to start with your exhibition here at Etherton Gallery, but whatever you'd want to start with.
You know what? Ask away, Shannon.
Okay. And then just feel free to interrupt me. There's so much.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
For those of you in Tucson or those of you traveling to Tucson, the show's up until this Saturday, January 17th. It's been such an honor to have your work here, along with Frank Gohlke. The show's been spectacular. Thank you so much again for having your work here.
Believe me, when you emailed me asking if I wanted to do a show there, I was unbelievably excited. And then when you mentioned that you had this idea, this little idea to maybe include some Frank Gohlke prints, it was even more exciting at that point. And it came together so perfectly. You killed it. It was just like, just an absolute honor.
Oh, thank you. We're going to talk more about that too. I've been an admirer of Jason's work for quite some time. I specifically remember reading a Lens Scratch article by Eileen Smithson, an amazing photographer as well. And it was about the Oklahoma work that was showing in Tulsa at the Philbrook Museum.
Mm-hmm.
It was just so well written, and the article just drew me in, all of your images.
That's cool.
I fell in love. Fast forward to last spring, as Jason just said, I reached out to him on a whim, and in regards to showing at Etherton, and we were talking on the phone about it a few days later. I immediately knew I wanted to show Frank Gohlke's work with Jason's work. Frank's a fellow Tucsonan. He had exhibited at Etherton back in 2019. We showed his Mount St. Helens work and the grain elevators. I was already familiar with his work, but that exhibition, seeing the work in person, fell in love with Frank.
Mm-hmm.
He's not only a poet with his camera, but with his words as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we're definitely going to talk books, but this book, Thoughts on Landscape, absolutely love this book. This is by Frank. My friend Greg Albers published this. It's his thoughts and reflections, commentary on photography. Highly recommend it. Jason came to visit the gallery in August, and he came with his good friend Raymond Molinar.
That's right. Yeah, photographer as well. And I know Ray through skateboarding. Yeah.
And Ray's an amazing photographer as well. They came to the gallery. I'll never forget. It was amazing. Jason walked in with a cooler, and he immediately came back to where I'm sitting now and sat here in my office with me for basically the entire workday, 8 hours. And we laid out the entire show, went through images, watching him go back and forth. You have to run up to the gallery this way. It was just very exciting. And then we talked about Frank's work, and I was toast after that. I'm not sure if you were, but I loved watching you create that exhibition. It was great. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
And I went off topic here. Well, now that I've talked about your show, I would love to know your thoughts on just the entire process, how it went for you, everything.
Well, it was nice to collaborate with you, and it's always nice to get other people's takes on things. Do you know what I mean? It can be a little bit tricky because when it's your photos and you feel a certain way about them, and then how photos can change and morph a little bit when you start pairing images together, and then how they might feel a little bit different when you size them differently or go bigger or go smaller. There's a lot of sort of technical things that apply to laying out books and curating exhibitions. I think particularly with my kind of work as well, because oftentimes images aren't standalone as much as they appreciate and take on a different kind of meaning or value when you start pairing them. And I really take a lot of pleasure in curating in that way. Like, oh, I like this picture with this picture, and together I'm going to create a diptych, and then we have a more sort of complete sense of this location or this scene or this moment. And so I get pretty technical with sizing and sequencing and what should come after what, and should that be a standalone? Should that be a diptych? I love all of that. That's a big part of the creative process for me, from, again, sequencing books and sizing images in books and curating. It's sort of akin to like editing a film. Like half of the creative process of filmmaking is the editing. And so I put a lot of stake in curating and designing sequences and all of that stuff. And so you and Terry Etherton being open to my sort of OCD-ness about all of that kind of stuff was such a treat, such a pleasure. And I think there was a nice balance between everybody's sort of take on everything, and it came together really nicely.
Yeah. There is a wonderful section on Jason's website, jasonleefilm.com. It's called Journal. There's like little sections you can go in. And in that section, you can read writings by Jason with his thoughts, sort of like Frank's book, with his thoughts on photography, in particular images he's made, projects he's working on, so much more. It's like a behind the scenes. I dive in. I was back in there the other day.
I don't do it enough though. I think the last journal entry is like 3 years ago.
Well, and that's funny.
I should do it more often. Yeah.
Yeah. And are you writing that when you're on the road, or is it after?
Well, you kind of, I think everybody tires of Instagram, you know what I mean? And it's like, just being on the phone too much.
Yeah.
And so that's my attempt to sort of get things off of Instagram and express things a little bit more long form. And you can layer in a bunch of photos and you can scroll through everything and, attach links to certain things on other parts of the website or whatever. I just don't do it enough, but it's nice to it helps you kind of define and figure things out as you're writing long form about something. That part of it, that's another part of the process, is kind of writing about stuff and just sort of making sense of everything. And it helps you kind of define things and maybe understand things a little bit better about your own work when you're kind of trying to figure out how to write about what you're doing. So that's kind of challenging, and I like doing it, but I don't do it enough.
Well, there's a lot on there. I hope you will do more.
Yeah.
Because that's where you just learn so much. I feel like I'm in your mind, and I enjoy. It sort of reminds me of Weston's day books. It's all there, and it very personal. And your thought process, like you talk about going back and re-photographing things, that you had, and then you show that, or different viewpoints.
I like doing that a lot. I like doing revisiting a lot of locations that are familiar to me and making new pictures. And, I actually did, there's a great publisher in the UK called Stanley Barker, and they published, this is a book of black and white square format images from a 2017 road trip from Texas to LA. And then the next year we did a color companion from a 2019 road trip from Texas to LA. And so the books have been designed identically. One is black and white and one is color. And so there's a lot of repeat images seen in black and white and then seen 2 years later in color. And I like doing that a lot. I like revisiting and just kind of seeing what is what and how things look, and I think maybe there was an early sort of inspiration for that by seeing William Kristen Berry's Hale County, Alabama photographs, where over decades he would revisit, structures and things that he had photographed in the 60s, and then he was photographing them still in the 2000s. And it's almost sequential. You see like a structure, and then the very last photo from decades later, that structure has been completely enveloped by the foliage around it. And it's just kind of interesting to see that progress, or the opposite of that. But so I like being on the road. I like driving between Texas and California, and I like revisiting locations that I've been sort of driving through going back to like 2008. And so I have a lot of, images of, there's a strange little landmark in Seligman, Arizona off Highway 40 that I've been sort of photographing newly since 2008. It's nice to do that and just kind of, it's familiar and somehow comforting, but I like revisiting locations.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I read a lot about that in your journal section on your website. I wanted to read the quote that I read. Again, I got sucked in a while back and just down a rabbit hole there with your writings. And I found the quote that I used for the exhibition. There's a section where you are in Taos, and there's a photograph, which I do have in the slideshow. It's towards the end. If we could go to that. Thank you. And I'll start reading. I'll let you know when we get there. You say, woke up in Taos, ate breakfast, met some photographers, headed south, and stopped to see the famous and very well photo documented San Francisco de Assis Church. Hopefully I said that correctly. Had never been there, but had seen Ansel Adams and Paul Strand's pictures of it. One of the reasons I chose to step back whenever possible, that I choose to step back whenever possible when photographing something, is that I find it important to show what lie around or in the way of it when applicable. The scene of a place or around something, the whole of it, or at least a portion of the whole of it. A more objective view, documenting not only context, but the now natural and accepted contrasts and contradictions that make up much of what and how we see is key for me, not being afraid of presenting reality, or at the very least offering an alternative view. At a place like this very famous church, most folks are going to be interested in the structure itself, and you can't blame them. It's beautiful. But I feel a strong sense of need to show a broader view, thank you, it's that one, a more complete view, and perhaps a truer view. This sacred burial ground was surrounded by construction scraps and materials, bright orange construction cones, rundown buildings, innumerable vehicles, and a gift shop. I understand why, but to avoid such things is to present a kind of untruth. At one point, a UPS truck speedily and noisily drove into, around, and then out of the plaza, its driver blasting Creedence Clearwater Revival and moving about frivolously as he might be if he were traversing a strip mall parking lot. Even the sacred things and the beautiful natural things are being disturbed or disrupted by something, in some way always. Irony abounds, and it can be sad, and it can be humorous, strange, interesting, odd, blatant or slight, but still it's there. Environmental contrast and contradiction. These conflicts, this is where the questions are, and by this I am motivated. When I read that, it just added to your work for me. And so definitely,
wow.
Viewers, get into the journal section on his website and yeah, get in there, because it just made me look at your work.
That's so cool that you read that. I forgot about
I know that was long, but I had to add one thing. And we have seen this image, and I've seen the Ansel Adams, I've seen the Paul Strand, and then
yeah.
get your
I mean,
take.
and that's a wonderful thing to do, to document, and I think the point is, it's probably that during that time that maybe that was all that was there. You understand? And so kind of ignoring what's around it and trying to recreate what was done in the 1930s or whatever. I don't know that that's necessarily fair, or and also too, I think it's fun to kind of laugh when you see things like these t-shirts hanging there at the gift shop in front of the church. Like I mean, it's like, even if you never use that picture, it's a recording of a reality. And I find it, ultimately humorous, essentially. I mean, what can you do but just kind of chuckle or laugh, or, I mean, it's inescapable, basically,
Well, and I feel like that fits with Frank's work. Frank was in the influential exhibition New Topographics, photographs of man-altered landscapes, and then we're looking at that here, and that was such a shift at the time. I really wanted to share that, because when I read that and then all of that together,
I think, it's great. I love that photo of Frank's right there, where you see the backs of the signs.
Love that one.
Fantastic. Yeah. I mean, it's sort of like, I read a lot of Robert Adams, Why People Photograph is a very important book. I read this often, just lying in bed, and I make little notes and stuff like that. And it's really an interesting point of view about sort of his focus is really, really about like the destruction of, the West. Um,
Mhm.
and there's so much validity there. And there is that kind of sense of like, man, I wish things were more like they were back then before development, things got overdeveloped. And it is true, like, oh man, there was a lot more peace and the views were a lot prettier at some point way back in the day. But for unfortunately, that's just not the case. And so it's sort of like what you're faced with is ultimately kind of what's presenting itself based on what we've done to the landscape as human beings. And so it sucks, but it's also, it is what it is. And I find it interesting to be open to that and to
Def-
photograph things as they lay and just sort of facing that, I think, instead of trying to escape it and find something more beautiful around the corner that isn't as disturbed or polluted or disrupted by something. I don't, it's hard to look at, the Ansel Adams prints are absolutely glorious, beautiful prints, stunning, and they make you want to go to Yosemite. But with just this insane development of the West, it's hard to look at something like that and not think about what's on the outside of that frame, which is strip malls and pollution and trash and litter and overpopulated, national parks with buses and tourists and overfilling trash receptacles. And, not that you need to photograph that, but at least you need to be aware of it. And so I think when those earlier guys, in going back to Eugene Atget in Paris, like he was sort of like the original guy that was just kind of photographing what was there. And you don't always not, Eugene Atget was shooting the Eiffel Tower as one might see it standing wherever on a certain sidewalk. And there might be a pole, a pole in front or something obstructing the view because those are views of the Eiffel Tower as well. It's not just everywhere you go, it's a perfect, pristine photograph of just the Eiffel Tower. And so I always responded to that, the Eugene Atget stuff in Paris. And then, of course, from there, we started seeing the Walker Evans stuff. And, this sort of urge to sort of just be there, placed where people are actually placed and showing the world from that perspective, I think is interesting and it's very confronting. Um, uh, if you have the new Topographics book, there's an interview between a couple at the beginning of the book about the exhibition in 1975 at Eastman. And somebody is interviewing this young couple, and the girlfriend is basically saying how much she hates the show. And she doesn't understand why people are making pictures of parking lots and strip malls and these things. And it's an interesting little interview. And she's not wrong to question that. But I think that's an example of how we've sort of maybe gotten a little bit used to thinking that photography has to feel or look a certain way to be photography. And I like that a certain group of people were sort of starting to question that.
Definitely.
I mean, this is 74, Frank Gohlke here with the Kmart sign in the background. Like,
Well,
take it or leave it, but that's now a part of the American landscape. And it's not just beautiful half dome in Yosemite.
mhm.
But it is important to question it as that young woman was doing in that new Topographics exhibition interview. She didn't understand it. She didn't like it. She didn't think it was beautiful, any of it. And then her partner was like, well, but why are they shooting that? Maybe there's something to it. And I like that kind of debating and that kind of dialogue of what is photography, what is beautiful, does it have to be beautiful? What is all of that? And these are questions that we're still asking ourselves and each other to this day as we go out and make pictures. We're still trying to figure out what it all means, essentially. But I think we're drawn to doing something ultimately honest in some way, I think is still a draw for me. And that's what kind of keeps me going is this kind of this sense of appreciation, even if I disagree with it. Um, and and just kind of facing those realities.
Yeah. And on that note, I would love, because we were talking about it before we popped on here, can you tell us how you got into when you started photography, how you got
Mhm. Well, in the early skateboarding days in the 90s, we were shooting a lot of Super 8 cameras and stuff like that for the videos that we were making.
into?
And I knew I was really into the visual arts and stuff like that, and into like filmmaking and editing and, images and stuff like that. But I didn't really get into photography uh, until 2001. I was shooting a movie up in Vancouver, and I had done films as an actor up to that point. From about 94, I started acting. And for whatever reason, I never really paid much attention to the cameras and whatnot. This one particular day, I'm just sitting on the end of this bed, as everybody's setting up cameras, we're about to shoot a scene or whatever. And I'm just kind of sitting there looking around. And somehow out of the blue, I just really started kind of focusing on the big Panavision camera.
Mhm.
And for some reason, a little spark went off, and I was like, I, I haven't even really ever bothered to look as an actor at what's going on around me. Why
Mhm.
is that light warmer and that light's bigger and whiter? What is all of this? And I just started talking to the camera guys, and I started taking down notes. Color temperature, 2700 Kelvin, 5500 Kelvin. HMI lights, tungsten lights. Oh, cool. Blah blah blah. 18% gray. Why are they holding up color charts and gray charts in front of the lens? Blah blah. And I just dove right in. I started buying cameras, film cameras, including a Bolex 16 millimeter camera, and I just dove in hard. And then I got back to LA, and I got, seamless paper backdrops, and I got strobes, and I got umbrellas, and I got soft boxes. And I just dove in, pushing and pulling film and learning about, incident metering compared to spot metering or reflective metering. And I just got super nerdy about it. And that was about 4 or so years. And then I had an 8 by 10 1930s Century Universal field camera. And I was shooting a lot of large format 8 by 10 Polaroid film in this little studio that I had, doing portraits and stuff like that. I loved Polaroid film a lot, the peel apart stuff.
Mhm.
And then one day I was like, you know what? I want to see what this film looks like outside. And I want to kind of just leave the studio and just go look. And I wonder if looking with when you have cameras is a different kind of looking than when you're just on a road trip to go visit your mom or something. And lo and behold, it was a lot different with a camera in the back. Suddenly, what do things look like? And how does this all make sense for kind of um, exterior photography? And I started shooting 8 by 10 Polaroids out on the road with a little Calumet hand crank processor, because it requires a processor with the large format Polaroid films. And I'm really kind of liking these results. And I knew that I liked that feeling of mystery and what's around the corner, and what is the lay of the land? What does it really look like when you're kind of there and trying to be a part of it? You know,
Mhm.
um, and I really loved the feeling of it. And I got home, and then I proceeded to sell all of my studio gear, all the lighting, all the backdrops, everything. And I just kind of wanted to strip it all down and just kind of be outside and just kind of try to make sense of that. And then I started shooting conventional film and stuff like that. And I felt like my instincts were somewhat right. The curiosity anyway felt valid, that I was curious. And then in 2007, I was in San Francisco. I went to San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, and they had a Henry Wessel retrospective. And I didn't know a ton about photography. I knew William Christenberry's Alabama photos. I had seen Joel Sternfeld's American Prospects, and of course, I knew about the Edward Westons and the Paul Strams and the Ansel Adams and even like the Man Rays and stuff like that. But I didn't know a ton. And I discovered this guy Henry Wessel. They're doing a retrospective of his work at SF MoMA. I was completely blown away. It totally validated what felt like the right kind of instinct to just kind of confront what's there and to make sense of it. I liked that, and his printing was incredible as well. And then in the gift shop, I bought this fantastic book, which is essentially the catalog for that exhibition. And this is the very one that I bought that day in 2007. And I was shooting My Name is Earl at the time. And so in between takes and setups and all of that stuff, I'd run back to my trailer and read the introduction by Sandra Phillips.
That's so great.
And that's how I learned so much from her essay. And then she also mentions John Sharkovsky, who was very supportive and encouraging of sort of just kind of direct, placed, honest photography. And that made the rabbit hole even deeper. And I just kept digging and digging and digging and shooting and learning more about photography and slowly starting to buy photo books and just absolutely hooked on it. And I haven't stopped since then. And so this year marks 20 years now of kind of just trying, being out there and having fun and just kind of trying to make sense of it all,
Yeah. Yeah. Can you tell me about the camera behind you there?
Oh yeah, this is a 4x5 Vista. It's relatively newish. I've had it for a few years, but the lens is an old Kodak Ektar lens from 1941. I like kind of a little bit more of a kind of muted, softer color palette, and this old uncoated kind of low contrast 1941 lens is just so perfect. Yeah, so this is my 4x5 setup, and not this exact lens, but another older Kodak Ektar 127 millimeter lens is the lens that I made the pictures in Texas for my book Plain View, which came out in 2018. And so I love those old lenses. And yeah, so that's the old 4x5 right there.
Well, and
but then I'll go out with my kids to the park or whatever, and I'll shoot a little plastic Fuji Cardia 35 millimeter point and shoot because fantastic results. I love point and shoots. You keep them in your pocket whenever you're going out. And I have so much film of my kids just eating quesadillas at a Mexican restaurant somewhere. Like I'm always just like, and that stuff will probably never ever see the light of day outside of saving it for my children, which I think is important and wonderful to do things like that. But yeah, I mean, just bouncing around with cameras and, just always being out exploring, I think is just incredibly fun for me.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned your Plain View book because I wanted to let viewers know, again, if you're in Tucson, we have a few copies of that left. You've sold out 2 editions of that?
Yeah, so 2018 we did the book, and then we also did a soft cover edition. And then we set aside, like 250 of those to sell at a later date. What we decided to do at the beginning of 2025 is the bindery in San Antonio, they took out the book blocks and they made a new hardcover for just like 230 copies.
Yeah.
So I did sort of like a 2025, rebind edition using the original pages with a newly designed hardcover as like a small little special edition of the book. But yeah, it originally came out in 2018.
Yeah, and like I think we have maybe 3 or 4 copies left. I'm not sure how many more we have, but yeah, I mean, and I want to talk to you about books as well because it's I'm a book nerd for sure.
Yeah, it's so fun making books.
You are, but yeah, I just strongly suggest to viewers, when you see a book and you're like, oh, I'll get it later, or I'll come back. They sell out. Cartagena's Carpoolers. I'd love to have the first edition of that, and they'll bring it back out. Or like Deanna Templeton's That's What She Said. I was gonna buy that one and I didn't, and now it's sold out. So treat yourself and buy them because
books are just a tremendous source of inspiration. And for me too, so are films. I think like an early seed for me was in the early 90s. My friend Mark Gonzalez, a legendary pro skateboarder and artist, he he had me watch Paris, Texas, Wim Wenders film. He had it on VHS. This was as probably as early as 91. And it's odd that it was that long, that like 91, that was only like 7 years after Paris, Texas had come out.
Right.
It's wild. Anyway, I saw Paris, Texas, immediately fell in love with Robby Müller's cinematography.
Yeah.
Holy,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so when I was living in Texas from 2015 to 2019, it was in 2017 that with the 4x5 camera, I spent 5,000 miles driving around Texas making the pictures for what would become a plain view, very much with Robby Müller in mind, for sure, and drawing inspiration, in terms of color palette and stuff like that. So for me too, as a photographer, films and cinematography. I mean, if you watch films like Badlands, there's obvious, blatant inspiration there. Films like Days of Heaven, and everybody loves Roger Deakins for good reason. The way he the way he photographed West Texas in No Country for Old Men. I mean, these are obvious, wonderful sources of inspiration that for me are as important as photographic inspiration.
Yeah. I I know we're gonna run out of time. I have so much more I want to talk
No,
to
no,
you.
let's do it.
But I wanted you to talk about your camera shop.
Oh,
People
Raymond Molinar and I have a little mom and pop, analog camera shop in Eagle Rock, which is in between Glendale and Pasadena. And yeah, we sell used cameras and film and photo books. And we show prints there sometimes, and we do book signings. And Ray and I both grew up in skate shops coming from skateboarding, and we wanted to open something that felt comfortable, inviting. We have a long table in the middle where people can come and hang out and look at books, and we serve coffee and sometimes give out donuts. And it's just like a cool little hang spot that makes people feel sort of included, I think. And
Mhm.
it's just our way of kind of supporting photography in the film community.
How long have you had the shop?
Over 2 years now.
Okay. I
Yeah,
need
over 2 years now.
I'm coming.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's really fun. It's sort of our way of having uh, you know, kind of, it's retail, but it's also as much as sort of a support
I do,
system.
and I love all the books. I see a lot of, yeah.
Yeah, we love selling. It's so fun to explore different publishers and new photographers, and we sell so many books at the shop, which is so encouraging that people just still love printed matter. You know, it's really cool and it's also amazing the amount of first rolls of film that we've sold to newcomers is so cool. And we get people that come in like, oh, the last time I bought a roll of Tri-X was in 1992, and we sell this person their first roll of film in 30 some odd years, and they always have smiles on their faces. And it's a pretty cool experiment, and to see like what people are into, and just the experience is really exciting to connect with people. We have a lot of returning customers and people that just kind of come and nerd out and look at books and talk about lenses and stuff.
Mhm. And I also wanted to ask you what is on the horizon for you photographically, future
Mhm.
projects, exhibitions, books?
Wow. Yeah, I have the Oklahoma black and white book is coming out, I think April. And then I have another book coming out in next year. And then in 2020, yeah, I have kind of a rough book slate that takes me into the 2030s. I try
Wow.
to be kind of organized in that way. But yeah, just always working on books pretty much. That's
Yeah.
kind of the main thing. And then I think I have some exhibitions lined up, at least one for next year. So just constantly trying to keep that train moving.
Yeah. I think I'll open it up to, let's see if I can see if we have questions here. Um, let's see. Anonymous attendee. Hi, Jason. What is it like for you looking out at the landscape and seeing a picture? What is that moment of recognition like? And how do you then know when you've gotten the shot? Do you generally make multiple exposures or set up a shot and make a single one?
That's a great question. Awesome. With the 4x5 camera, it's usually one exposure. But then when you've got something like an SLR or something, and you get out of your car and you're kind of walking around, you might pop off a few different angles or whatever. But with the 4x5, it's usually just with the pictures for a plain view, it was usually just sort of, it's kind of that feeling when you're driving and you see something, right when you see it at that certain angle or the way it presents itself immediately, if it asks questions or there's something curious or beautiful, or the lines or the shadow, there's something enticing there, immediately there's a feeling like, oh my gosh, that looks so cool, or oh, that's so interesting. And then I try my best to photograph it as I first saw it, and then you might kind of explore it and see how it might look from different angles. But it's usually very spontaneous and it's usually very quick. Doing your best to kind of just serve it as you saw it and kind of just stay out of the way a little bit and just let it do its thing.
I love this question. This is Shannon Stevens. Wondering if Jason has a go-to photo road trip soundtrack or mix that he returns to when he goes. That's good.
That's a good question. Hey, maybe I'll throw it all on Spotify and put it in my stories or something and share the playlist. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little cliche, to be honest. I've always, Bob Dylan is my number one guy since I was in my 20s. There's always Dylan. And then, I've been a big jazz fan since the early skateboarding days. Getting turned on by Mark Gonzalez to John Coltrane and stuff like that. He also turned me on to Neil Young. But yeah, I mean, it's mostly like, it'll be like, Dylan, Neil Young, Howlin' Wolf, some old good blues stuff, and but a lot of like guitar kind of stuff. But then I'll throw on, OK Computer, and because I like that energy too. But it's a lot of just kind of like sad guitar music, kind of. You know what I mean? Yeah, I mean, maybe I throw together a playlist if anybody's interested in that or
I
whatever.
think you should, yes.
But yeah, I mean, that's just that's the kind of stuff I like. The kind of songwritery kind of stuff. I don't know if that sounds stupid or pretentious, but I'm switching between that kind of songwriter type stuff and a lot of jazz and some old blues and stuff like that.
Mhm. Oh, okay. Anonymous attendee. The skateboarding photography connection is real. Jason, do you see a commonality there in terms of how both photographers and skateboarders are trying to read surfaces in the environment and how else those surfaces could be used or become interesting?
Phenomenal question. I get that occasionally, and I like to talk about that as well. Again, like, I can't credit skateboarding enough. It's any skateboarder will tell you that it's the greatest thing that has ever happened to them, bar none.
Yeah.
Because without skateboarding, I wouldn't have traveled and seen other cities and experienced other cultures. And if you're with the right kinds of skateboarders, when you go to London on a skate trip, you'll go to the museum or you'll go to the Tate because they'll know about, oh, there's a such and such exhibition at the Tate right now, blah blah. And then suddenly you're really open to like records and design and architecture and travel, and there's just this kind of invigoration that's always there to just go out and explore, find new spots to skate. And with that, absolutely, like when you're driving as a photographer, it's very similar to driving as a skateboarder, and you're sort of seeing things a little bit differently than somebody who's just sort of maybe driving to work. That parallels nicely where you're seeing things in the landscape that have some kind of interest or valid or value. And it's very similar with photography as well. The way you're looking at things a little bit differently. very much that comes from skateboarding. Absolutely. It's tied in.
Yeah. Uh, let's see. Christy Fisk, even when the work is about human disturbance, the absence of people can feel eerily peaceful. How do you think about that tension when you're photographing?
Usually when I'm out and about, there just happens to not be a lot of people there.
I
You know
was
what I mean? And I mean, obviously, if you're walking around downtown LA or in San Francisco or New York or Chicago, you're going to see people everywhere.
wondering.
But when you're kind of roaming around Oklahoma and you pull up into a town of 50 people, and you see something interesting, and there's not going to be a lot of people there. And even if there were, by the time you set up your camera, they will have probably walked by or whatever. You know, it's usually about place for me, place and thing, really.
This is from Brian Frick. How do you know when a project or body of work is complete? And or is there such a thing as completion?
No, there's no completion if you're just keep if your sort of quest is to just keep documenting and collecting images, and that's the case for me, and I think everybody else. But I think when you are like let's say laying out a book, there's definitely a certain kind of feeling when you're because I make dummy books too, so I'll just take like kind of art craft paper or whatever, and as I'm laying out books in the computer, I'll print out those pages at actual book size and actual image size, and I tape the pages together, and it allows me to sort of flip through. And by doing that, instead of just using the monitors, I'm able to sort of have something tangible in my hands, and I'll do the entire book, and it's often quite thick because you're doubling up pages with tape and stuff like that. But I'll flip through it, and I'm able to go, I don't really need that photo, or maybe I'll swap those two, and then having that reference is enough to help you know when something feels done. Um, and it's the same with curating. You might switch something and go, oh, that's actually better there, and then I don't need that one because then that there's a lot of math to it, but then it ultimately ends up feeling a certain way. So it's an interesting same with photographing and curating and designing photo books. There's a lot of math and thinking, but then when that's kind of dialed in and it makes sense, then you kind of shift from the thinking of it, and then it starts to just feel right. And when you're flipping, this feels good. It's an interesting relationship between thinking and feel. And I like that process a lot. Mapping it all out, and then it starts to feel a certain way, and then you kind of know you're likely done.
This
I
is,
could go for 2 more hours. Keep them
I
coming.
know, I
Come
know.
on. These talks are not long enough. Let's go.
I have a bunch I wanted to. Well, before was there anything we didn't get to that you wanted to talk about?
I don't know. Well, the photo on the screen, for example, that's me driving, 11 hours that day, just roaming around Texas, making, a bunch of exposures that day, and then not knowing where I am, and you're tired and you're hungry and you've been driving and it's aimless, and you don't know where you are. It's fantastic. And I rounded the corner here and I turned right around the corner, and that's the view that I saw. Like the light on the corner and this Dodge truck sitting there like that, and that weird little sharp thin piece of concrete sticking out of the sidewalk. And that's where I parked my car, and then I took the tribe and the thing, and I set the camera up, and I had my spot meter or my reflective meter, and I'm taking all my different values, and that ends up being about 15-second exposure, and it's that one exposure, and then the everything gets sort of labeled and whatever, and you put everything back in the car, and then you go find a restaurant that hopefully serves good enough food because you're in some little town somewhere you have no idea. And that's the process. And so it's like coming up onto that, it just presents itself, and you just kind of try to position yourself against it as you saw it. you make one exposure and then you kind of move on. And so over the years, it sort of becomes essentially like collecting moments, collecting images from things that you've seen as you were kind of moving through the world. That process is very exciting to me. What you discover as you're moving through the world.
And I know we discussed this, and I had it in my questions and with a viewer question, but hearing you say that, it reminds me of like my kid looking for skate spots. You know, he's
Oh, for sure. For
looking
sure.
at that and driving around and finding that perfect spot in and of to do a skate trick. And
That's
then,
absolutely right.
and then photography, I would drive around to find what I was looking for to photograph. But it's like that same excitement, you know, he's so excited to find
Yeah.
that.
I'm going to read something. 1 second. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
I'm going to grab a book.
Okay.
Forgive me for bouncing up, but this is one of the books I forgot to grab in my pile of books around my computer right now that I was hoping to reference. But this is Steidl did a 5-book box set of Henry Wessel photos. And this is book number 1 of the set, and it's titled California in the West. And Mr. Wessel sums the process up very nicely. The process of photographing is a pleasure, eyes open, receptive, sensing, and at some point connecting. It's thrilling to be outside your mind, your eyes far ahead of your thoughts. And that sums it up so nicely, the feeling of that's kind of buzzing in you when you set out to go out and just kind of see what presents itself.
Yeah.
It's just like with skating, like you put your boards in the trunk and you're driving around and you can't wait to see what the environment, how it presents itself, and then what you end up doing with it, how you connect with it. It's similar with photography as with skateboarding.
I bet. Yeah, that quote was great. I'm probably out of time, but I forgot to ask you, how was it you got to photograph Henry Wessel, correct?
I got to spend a day with him in 2010, I believe. He was coming to LA and we spent the day together chatting. And, you know, it's a great way to sort of end here. I would hate to see this end. I want to keep going, but if it has to end, I would say that Henry Wessel, one of my absolute heroes, actually came to my house, and it was unbelievably exciting. And we drank bottled Coca-Cola and ate tacos at the dining table and talked. And I was able to make an 8x10 black and white Polaroid portrait of him in my garden, standing there always with his Leica M6 in his hand. And he always with just that wonderful, big, excited smile. And the most incredible thing from that day is that I'm sitting across the table from this legend. He had already been photographing for more than 40 years at that point and exhibited in museums around the world. And talking about photography, he was as giddy and excited as one might be after getting their first roll of film developed. Yay. And that made an indelible mark on me. And it really showed me how much it matters to essentially appreciate and be curious and to never let that enthusiasm or that spark die. Was a grown man who had been shooting again for already more than 4 decades, who got so excited talking about photography and lenses and pulling film and then he was like this with a big smile on his face. And it was like, it meant so much to me because it reminded me that should never, ever go away, that enthusiasm and that curiosity. And I've been as excited about shooting as at 55 as I was when I first took that first road trip 20 years ago. And I hope to keep that spark because it's really, really fun.
I just wanted to pop in to say we can go for another 10 minutes. We have so many questions. And
let's party. Let's keep this party going.
Great.
Party going.
I got lost on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
questions. Let's see what I did not. Did I ask that one? I asked that one. Okay. Um, have
All
you
these
tried?
color photos, by the way, most of these are from a plane view from the time, my time in Texas. And just some interesting things out there. This is
Actually,
somewhere up in the panhandle of Texas, a little town called Sanford. And you roll into town, and the first thing you see when you look over to your right is this little store with the sad but still hanging on kind of tipped over lamppost. And you're like, welcome to Sanford. And clearly you can see from the palette that I'm completely ripping off Robby Müller's palette in Paris, Texas. And I'm not ashamed to admit that.
actually, I would love for you to talk to me about white structure number two, Arizona.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Give me the story on that one.
That's Ash Fork, Arizona, a town I always pop off into when I'm on Highway 40 in northern Arizona as I'm sort of driving between, Texas and California. That's a town that I sort of revisit. Um, and there's a location right behind where I'm standing that I've sort of repeatedly photographed over the years, and just the way the sun was sort of coming at me, I happened to just kind of turn and just see that view right there, and I just really liked what the light was doing and the shadows, and then with this little structure there, and I just took a photo. And then if you scroll to the left on the slide, yeah, and then I walked a little bit to my left, and then I shot that photo probably 42 seconds later. So those are the same poles. I've just positioned myself differently, and then but yeah, so again, it's just me being on foot, boom, and then going, oh, that's a nice angle, and I like how the road kind of, okay, and then it just, and then you see what you're going to do with it later. Maybe nothing comes of it, but in this particular case, I liked this as a pairing, and those two ultimately got paired side by side for the exhibition at Etherton. Um, and that's a good example of like, let's create a kind of pairing here, a kind of unity of the same kind of moment, but looking at it from different, I like doing that. I like kind of creating creating kind of a moment with two different photos like that.
And with these photos, these were 11 by 14. So Jason
Yeah.
paired all of the smaller images in the
Yeah.
show, and then the largers were on their own. And I thought that that worked out beautifully.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, I like breaking it up too because it's nice to like 20 by 24, and then there's a smaller diptych with an interesting kind of maybe theme, or there's something kind of similar going on with the two pictures. So there's kind of a little moment with these two pictures playing off of one another, and then the next picture is another 20 by 24. And I like that the eyes can kind of go like this, in an exhibition, and just kind of breaking things up a little bit is fun. It's a fun way
Yeah.
to process all of that.
I'll do another question. This is
Yeah.
Stephen Farley. Your photos reminded me of stories I heard about the first road trip that Ed Ruscha took with Mason Williams when they moved to LA in the early 70s, on which Mason wrote Classical Gas, and Ed got inspired to do those monumental gas station paintings and so much more. Is there something about that in between landscape that colonizes our art brains?
What in between landscape? Like the things that break up the natural landscape? Is that what that means?
Is there something
Um, if so, I think that's what that means, maybe.
that
But
means?
I love Ed Ruscha a lot. I love his paintings. I also love his photographs. I think he did a book called Los Angeles Apartments, which I think is interesting. Um, but yeah, that's really cool that it reminds you of that. I love Ruscha. I'm also a big Dennis Hopper fan as well. And
Mhm.
he did a book called Drugstore Camera.
Mhm.
He used to drive from LA to Taos, New Mexico a lot. And there's a book that is called Drugstore Camera where it's just the actual drugstore prints. Because, back in the day, you would get your prints back from whatever drugstore. And the photo is just like kind of scrapbook drugstore prints of drives out to Taos.
Mhm.
And I like, I like, I also like kind of photography a little bit, if you will. Like when people are just trying to sort of be there and just kind of document what's going on around you. And, you think something looks cool or maybe it doesn't. And there's a nice kind of lightness to that as well, because sometimes it gets a little heady
Mhm.
and I get heady with it too. And I love to read a lot about photography and stuff like that, and to make sure that I understand what I'm doing. But I also like, I do find that it is romantic. There is a romantic sort of feeling about being out on the road and listening to music, and we're remembering Ed Ruscha, and we're remembering Dennis Hopper's road trips, and we even think of films like Easy Rider or whatever. Like we have all of that going on, and there's a kind of American story there that's always playing, and it's okay to want to be a part of that. It's okay to romanticize. It's okay to have a scene remind you of something from a film and you want to document that and kind of do your part to kind of keep that dialogue going. I think it's okay to be open in that way
Mhm.
and not maybe always be so focused on like just being a photographer with something really, really fleshed out and concrete to say about what you do. There's also, just when you put all the theory and all the writing aside, there's also something fun about just being out on the road with your friends and you're listening to music and you're staying in whatever motel you can find, and you wake up in the morning and there's an incredible view, or a dog sleeping in the shade in front of the gas station. There's a little bit of a romance to all of that stuff too, and it's okay to embrace that, I
Yeah.
feel like. Anyway, I don't know if that answers the Ed Ruscha question, but
And I have a question that popped into my
yeah.
head when we were talking. What has been the most influential or just a really great, I want to say photography exhibition, but I don't know. I'm just any art exhibition recently, like one that's really stood out to you, that's been your favorite recently, if you've had time to go.
I should probably do that more. With me, it's more about books. My head is in books all the time. I should definitely get out more and see exhibitions and stuff like that.
We'll
But
talk
yeah,
about your favorite book.
it's primarily books,
Yeah.
it's primarily books, I think, that but again, that Wessel exhibition at SF MoMA in 2007, that was really, really instrumental for
Yeah.
me. It was so validating and so inspiring. Um, and seeing Frank Gohlke's original prints at Etherton. And in 2018, I spoke at Eastman, and they showed me some of the original new Topographics prints from their
Wow.
collection, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is incredible!"
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of like new stuff that's happening, I probably should like get out there a little bit more and go to more galleries and stuff.
Well, and come back to Tucson and come to CCP next time when you have time, and we'll
Yeah,
go.
Tucson is fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry for babbling so much, Irene, and going over, but it's a lot of fun to talk about this stuff.
We're so excited. All of us, as I mentioned before, we're all photography lovers and enthusiasts. I did want to ask you a question
Yep.
about your night photography and how you make those decisions. It's different. Are you driving around at night? Is it a town where you may be staying and you notice something at night? I mean, that requires a different set of technical capabilities, right? So how
Yeah,
do you
that's right.
make those decisions in terms of what you're shooting after dark?
Most of the night stuff that I've done was during the Texas 4x5 pictures. And that would be like, again, there's never a plan. It's just driving. And so, you're just aimlessly kind of driving around, and then it starts to get dark and you're like, okay, I should probably wrap this up. I need to find food. I need to find a motel. And you get off in some town, and again, you round a corner as you're driving through the little residential area or whatever on your way to find something that might still be open. And it's usually not. So it usually ends up being gas station food. Um, and you see something and you're tired, you've been driving all day, but you have to get the exposure. And it's usually really quiet, nobody's around, and you set up the tripod. And I have a light meter that has a reflective, a meter and an incident bulb. Anyway, so I'm just taking my readings and I'm sort of averaging and evaluating just the lighting. And then I'm doing my exposure. And then the camera goes back in the car, and then I try to find that motel. So
Yeah.
it's usually after driving all day and arriving somewhere after dark.
Awesome.
Yeah.
No, that's great. I'm a huge fan of nighttime photography, and I love those images that the gallery shared with us. Unfortunately, I'm not able to see the show in person, but for everyone
Oh,
who is, you've got to make it over to Etherton Gallery this week. The show is open through Saturday, and thank you both so much for being here today. It was really a joy, and these conversations bring so much insight into people's work, and we really appreciate you taking the time.
absolutely. Yeah, I hope some of that was maybe a little helpful. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks everyone for joining
Yeah.
us, and
Thank you guys.
take care and be well. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Irene. Thanks, Shannon.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.